All right, welcome to a brand new episode of No More Heroes. I'm your host, Andy Malafrina, and we have a very special guest on the line. Everyone give it up for Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown. Clint, how the hell are you doing, buddy?
I'm just imagining a live audience going crazy. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Going to be on Timcast for the second time in about 5 days. So that's always exciting. Get to go talk to a million people. Very weird, very surreal. But yeah, life's good, man. What about you?
Wait, second time on Timcast.
Yeah, I was on there about a year and a half ago. It was like a few months after I started my show. I have no idea why I got an invite, but actually, no, I do know why. Tim was asking about BlackRock ownership of real estate, and because I was a real estate broker and a mortgage lender for years, I just replied to him and I said, "Hey, if you need someone to explain this, like I'm your guy." And then because I had a really ferocious following, but very small, they all piled on, going, "Yeah, have Clint." And then I ended up going. But at the time, I honestly didn't even understand the depth of the issue as well as I do now. So I hope I get to make amends and clarify exactly what was transpiring, because there was more to it.
Well, that's actually a great place to start, because that's like the main reason, or the main thing I wanted to ask you about. Like, there's a plethora of things I want to ask you about, but I found out about you because of Part of the Problem. I checked out your show. I would listen from time to time, but I never would really like get. And then you had an episode about ESG. And it was one of those moments, like when you're into the shit we're into, you have these moments where you're like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool, interesting. Oh, nice. But then you get a tidbit of information. You're like, that's why that shit's that way.
Right.
And when you were talking about ESG, that was a real big one for me, because I'm 32, and I know, like, I've only been like really hardcore paying attention to politics since like sometime mid-Trump presidency. I've always been aware, but I've only been like hardcore paying attention since like mid-Trump presidency. And I still was like paying attention enough to know like things are different now. Like, and it's confusing, like just existing in the world and being able to like talk to certain people and stuff. Like, it's just weirder now. It seemed to make a lot more sense like 10 years ago.
Yes.
And now, like, the shorthand is I tell people to go look up ESG and BlackRock, because the shorthand of it, are you wondering why everything feels more stupid? This is a big reason. So I wanted to bring you on and ask you, can you give us, and yes, I'm going to use this as a title, can you give us the ABCs of ESG?
Hey, that is a good title. Sure. I mean, I'll try and keep it quick, because I have given expanded explanations on my show, which people can go check out. But to keep the shorthand version that people can actually process, hopefully, in 2004, around 2004, actually it was 2000, UN comes out with some global climate initiative plans. By 2004, they actually have a paper that gets put out, and they're calling for what will soon be referred to as ESG. It didn't even have that name at the time, but it was essentially trying to create a public-private partnership between the UN, all of the biggest governments in the world, all of the biggest central banks in the world, and all of the biggest businesses in the world, all working in tandem to address the damage that capitalism causes, is the framing that they used. Whether or not you buy into that is a second conversation we can get into maybe. But what do you know? All of the biggest businesses that he sends, this is what's his name? Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the UN at the time. He sends out this letter to 50 biggest CEOs on earth, and he says, hey, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. What do you guys think? And they all respond in the affirmative. Yeah, that sounds fucking awesome. Obviously, we would love to be in bed with all of the biggest governments and biggest central banks on earth. We're in. Even though, basically what this letter is saying is like, big business is destroying the world. So like, why would big business be like, yeah, of course we want to be we want to help, and we want to take blame for destroying the world. Which, by the way, I don't believe in anthropogenic climate change. I think it's all nonsense. And I think that carbon emissions is like the product of life, and it's how we all stay alive. And ultimately, it has benefited our lives to use fossil fuels. And you are anti-human if you go down that route. That's a side note. We can maybe get into that later, too. So ESG at the time is just kind of a concept, but it starts to be implemented in the accounting practices when it comes to high finance. And what really sets the fire under this thing is the World Economic Forum gets on board. They have their meetings in Davos every year. They have all of the biggest CEOs on earth come out there. They all talk about this shit. They all basically start to game plan how this is going to work. And then it becomes an ESG scoring system where you have environmental, social, and governance are the three categories of ESG. Environmental is pretty straightforward. It's what your environmental impact is. Then social is kind of like the social justice stuff. Are you hiring enough women? Are you hiring enough minority candidates? And then governance is your board equitable? Like, do you have diversity on the board? Also, are you alleviating and addressing things like sexual harassment or, pay inequality? Well, just basically more woke shit. So those three categories constitute the entire framework for ESG. If your score is north of 60, you're able to be invested in by the biggest money managers on earth. The biggest money managers on earth manage tens and tens and tens of trillions of dollars. So if you don't have a high enough score and you're a publicly traded company, well, then BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard will threaten to either divest themselves of you, which means that they sell your stocks, which causes your stock to plummet, or they just won't invest in you in the first place. And that is basically a backbreaker to any company that's trying to make it in the world, because if you don't get the biggest money managers on earth to buy your stock, well, you're pretty much fucked. So that's it. That's how it works. And fortunately, we have over the past year or so, I started talking about this like a year and a half ago, but over the past year or so, it has started to gain steam where kind of the dissident right and the libertarian sphere has begun speaking about this. People are starting to wake up to how nefarious it is, how ultimately anti-human, anti-capitalist it is, and also how fascist it is. Because really what I'm describing, without saying it explicitly, I'll say it explicitly now, is fascism. It is a unification of the biggest businesses and the biggest governments and the biggest central banks on earth working in tandem to reimagine the entire global economy as well as civilization writ large. It's lunacy. It's extraordinarily dangerous, and it's done. What makes it even more dangerous is it's done with this idea of benevolence, that we are all knowing, we're better than you, we're looking after you. So it enables these people that go along with it to feel really good about themselves as they destroy the world, which is the most dangerous path you can be on, and which is why I have made this such a big part of my show, trying to wake people up to what it means.
I like that point you made. Also, that was perfect. Fucking killed it. I like that point you made about the focus on like doing good, and you said benevolence and you being a good person when, and it's ironic because it ends up being like super fascist.
Well, and it ends up with people starving to death,
exactly,
and freezing to death. And you're like, but I'm the good person. It's like, no, you're fucking not. People are starving and dying. So no.
Yeah. So, what do you think is like a big proponent of what keeps it going? Is it just the fact that like BlackRock and all these money managers have like so much fucking money, or is it a thing where because they use like that coded language and like normal people who aren't like into this shit like we are, they'll hear that and they'll go like, what the fuck's bad about, worrying about the environment or shit like that or
right,
equity?
Right.
They hear, but like, is it because the average person, when they hear that shit, they're like, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal.
Right.
Like what's the force that kind of keeps it going?
Personally, I mean, yes, there's the obvious, propagandistic language manipulation that's occurring that allows the common person to feel as if, well, this can't be bad. Like they're trying to address climate change. I've been told that I'm going to die if we don't address climate change. This has to be a good thing. But the real driving force behind it is the desire is the size of government. Basically, because you can't succeed at the highest levels of business in the world any longer unless you have a positive working relationship with the government. That's really the lesson that I'm trying to express to people, because most people think that this is a capitalism problem. It really isn't. Yes, the capitalists, quote unquote, are playing along with the government, and fuck them forever. They're all scumbags. I hate them too. But they can't do this if it weren't for their desire to have a positive relationship with these governments, which dole out special treatment, whether it be tax treatment, special contracts, whether or not it be government contracts, or special regulatory frameworks that allows them to excel while their competitors get crushed. I mean, the governments have too much power, and because they have that power, and because they're wielding it in a way that is really over the top tyrannical these days, well, these big businesses are just looking around like, well, yeah, if I don't play ball, my competitor is going to, and he's going to eat my lunch. So they just all go along with it. So it's really coercive. Like, I think that's the main thing I want to get across to people is like, yeah, I don't respect the CEOs that go along with this, but you like, just put yourself in their shoes. You get it. You know why they're doing it. Like, do you want to have your share price cut in half because you tell the ESG mob to kick rocks? Like, no, you're a CEO. You have a fiduciary duty to your investors as the CEO of Home Depot or whatever. So like, you're going to look after their best interests. So yeah, you're going to eat shit and you're going to lie through your teeth and say, we're rolling out ESG stuff too. Like, it's what I got to do. So yeah. I think that the root cause is the government and the size of government and the just the incredible power that they have attained for themselves over the past couple decades, and their willingness to now wield it in a really terrible fashion.
Interesting. So, because no, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm making me think about like the CEOs and stuff. They're kind of like, oh, I gotta do this. You know, like we gotta keep making money and got all this stuff. And if they don't give us money, or they sell our stock or whatever, our value is gonna plummet and all this stuff.
It's the same dynamic with the vaccine mandates, by the way. Just wanted to throw that in because that also adds to your ESG score. So it's like, if you're sitting there going like, why did basically every CEO get on board with this shit that was ultimately unscientific, and counterproductive and destructive? Why did they all do it? Well, now you know. I mean, the coercive nature of the government doesn't just stop when it comes to us, the individuals. Like, it goes all the way up to the highest levels of quote unquote the capitalist world. And I think that people don't give that enough credence. They don't think about it enough. They don't process what that means and why these people might be behaving how they are. And I'm not saying that they're like purely victims or they're good people. Like, I still think that they're scumbags for going along with it. But like, you just have to understand, the position that they're put in. That's all. Yeah.
Like the logic's there.
Right.
Yeah. I guess the thing I was trying to because it's I'm still new to, so the ESG thing is kind of like I'm starting to understand it a lot more, but a big proponent of, you said like the money managers is BlackRock, and I believe you said Citadel and a few others.
State Street and Vanguard and BlackRock are the three biggest that I'm aware of.
So here's my thing is I don't know if this is a quick answer or what, but I guess because I watched this thing the other night where they were going down the list of like everything BlackRock owned, and they might as well just have been like most of the shit. They might as well just like shorten it down and just been like, they own most of the shit. And I was like, oh my God. But then you're like, so you have these big corporations who, if you look at a big corporation, they have all, they seem like they have all the fucking money in the world, but they're going to these places like BlackRock and State Street and all those other places. Like, how do those groups
get their money?
Get all this money?
Yeah, it's they're money managers. So it's not really their money. That's the other thing that I try and get across to people. Like, it's your 401k. Like, if you have a job and your money is being managed by one of these big brokerages, that's where that money comes from. Like, when I say BlackRock has $10 trillion under management, that doesn't mean BlackRock is worth $10 trillion. They have $10 trillion of our dollars, whether it be state pensions or private 401ks or whatever. Like, they have that money because they are being entrusted as fiduciaries to us. So my argument is that a fiduciary, by the way, is just a legal term for, as a money manager, it is incumbent upon you, in fact, legally binding of you, to put your investors' interest over your own. So you have to, as a fiduciary, be looking out for the investors, even at your detriment. You have to, legally. And they're not doing that. I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from this, because I was a fiduciary. I managed hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what I did professionally. I know what being a fiduciary means. And this is why I take it so personally, that I know that they're violating their fiduciary responsibility to the tens of trillions of dollars that they have under management. It's evil. It's terrible. And in fact, I believe strongly that it's criminal. It is criminal because if you are focusing on investing in these companies based off of their fucking carbon output as opposed to their innovation and their cost cutting and their productivity and their profit margins, all of the things that you ought to be focused on when you're a money manager, you're an investment manager, you're making investment decisions for these people that have worked and saved and starved themselves just to get by. And all of a sudden they hand their little pittance of life savings over to these scumbags and they go, yeah, we'll give you some of this money, but we got to make sure that you're not producing too much carbon first. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know, like that's not what you're supposed to be doing. So that my argument is that these people ought to be sued, and I hope it happens. I think it is starting to happen, and I think as more people understand what I'm expressing, it'll become a deluge of lawsuits.
Yeah, hopefully. So the thing I always think about when looking into these topics and stuff like that, because I remember I have like I've talked to a lot of my friends who kind of who aren't into all this shit, and they'll kind of like laugh that I'm into it, and like a lot of them, they don't even like necessarily hate on it. They'll just be like, that's so much. Like,
yes,
dude, there will be like a monthly, because my wife, when I met her, she was not even like, she wasn't even into any of this shit, and now she's like a card carrying member of the LP. Like, I completely ruined her
nice
life.
Nice, or I'm sorry, either way.
It's a little bit of both. But she'll have these moments where we'll watch a documentary, or I'll kind of like break something down that I just learned, and I could see her having these moments like, fuck, dude. Like, what do I? And I've met a lot of my friends will like, whether they've explicitly said this, or I can just tell that they're like, yeah, I don't want to like,
yeah, I don't want to
I don't want to find out. But I think it's like, for me, like I used to be that guy where it's just like, does the government really affect your life? And then the more I learn about this stuff, I'm like, the government really affects your life. And I'm just like
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like but at the same time, you only have like one life, and it's a big ass to be like,
true.
Oh yeah, no, just get nerdy and autistic like us. So like, what's the elevator pitch to? And I personally hate. I don't love the term normie, because I've talked to people who we would consider normies, and they're like, yeah, I fucking hate that, dickheads.
Right.
But what would you like? What would be the elevator pitch to someone who's not into this shit like we are? To be like, at least you could do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, God, that's a tough one, because there is so much information that I have to, try and express to them. Honest to God, like my belief is that the vast majority of people, like, I have sympathy for that perspective. Like, I get it. Like, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to look this in the face. Like, it sucks.
Yeah.
It hurts. It hurts to like believe that not just your government, but also the entire fucking medical establishment, and also, the highest levels of corporate America. And then there's these supranational organizations, the World Economic Forum, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, the IMF and the World Bank, I can throw that in. Like, it's so fucking vast. Like, I don't blame anyone.
Also, and let me cut you off. You saw what Clint just did. You also start talking like that. You also start doing the you will change into a new person.
Yes, no, you do. I mean, it will change who you are. So my personal opinion is, like, for those people, if you're suffering under financial conditions that you find to be untenable, like you can't live with it, I would encourage you to spend a little time learning about why this system is broken, how it is. And if you are in college right now, you will have been told by your professors that it is a product of capitalism, and that's the end of the story. That's all they tell you. They say greed, capitalism, it's evil, blah, blah, blah. It's way more complicated than that. So if you don't want to go down this entire path and learn everything you can possibly learn about it, that's fine. Okay. I get it. I would encourage you not to vote. That's my honest opinion. Like, if you don't want to learn anything about this stuff, like, you probably shouldn't be putting your finger on the levers of power to decide how the future rolls out. My personal opinion is, like, the way we get through this period is that there is going to be some people from our movement that become charismatic leaders, that people just go like, I don't know all of the stuff that he's talking about, but like, I like that guy. And like, when he tells, like Ron Paul, for instance, incredibly compelling, incredibly well-read, knew all of what I'm talking about, but what was his catchphrase? It wasn't like the central bank is a product of fascism. It's this alliance between no. It's end the Fed. It's three fucking words. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, they're not going to understand the depths of this stuff. And as I've said, I don't blame them. You're going to have catchphrases. You're going to have kind of a from the bottom up populist movement that just says like, I know this shit's fucked up and this guy seems like he has the answers. I'm going to rock with him. And, that's, as that's what I hope Dave Smith has in him. And I hope that that's the moment that we experience over the next year or two. But that's my elevator pitch is like not really an elevator pitch to the people, but rather an explanation as to why I don't think it's worth trying to get this complicated message to every single person. Obviously, you could subscribe to Liberty Lockdown and I'll slowly educate you on it and you'll probably become very depressed and maybe suicidal. But like you don't have to go down that path if you don't want to.
I would also say, look at it too, like, like most people don't know how to fix their car. So they find a mechanic who has a good track record. Find an expert. If you don't know this shit politically, find people who have a good track record. Like I talked about it when that what the fuck, like the COVID amnesty article where they were like, I know we were all being like mini dictators for like 2 years, but just forget about that. And
we didn't know.
Yeah. But I made the point on the episode. I was like, go listen. Fucking Tom Woods was right pretty much all the time. Dave Smith was right pretty much all the time. Clint, you were right. Robbie the Fire was right. Like all the fucking boys were right. So like, look, if you're not understanding what they're saying now, at least look at their track record about what they got right. And Bingo. I guarantee you, if you look at dudes like Clint, Robbie, Tom Woods, Dave, Ron Paul, etc., they're putting up way more dubs than anyone on the mainstream media or corporate press, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Just base it off track record. Like you have all these people that have gotten everything wrong. They've lied to you for fucking decade after decade, and you're still listening to them and taking them even remotely seriously. Like why? So I think like if you're going to spend any time with like news media, just make sure that you spend it wisely. Spend it on Dave Smith. Spend it on Tom Woods. Spend it on someone other than fucking Rachel Maddow or whatever. Sean Hannity. Like no more. Yeah. Don't do that. So I think that that's a good lesson, and I hope I honestly I think that like millions and millions and millions of Americans have woken up to some extent, and they're on the path. Like whether or not they ever get to like full blown ANCAP lunatic level like I am is a totally different question. But like once you're woken up even a smidgen, it's very very tough to be sedated again. So I don't think that those people are going back to sleep.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. So. I wanted to ask you about this. So if you guys aren't aware of Clint, you said, what was your job again? Mortgage broker?
Yeah, I owned a mortgage company, a private money mortgage company.
That's right. And then you were able to retire like in your early 30s. And then, so this is the part that's interesting is like, you were able to retire way before like the average human being's ever able to retire. So you decided to go like, what made you want to get into doing the podcast game versus just chilling? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, because I retired in May of 2020, I was 37 at the time. So, but the real catalyst was the lockdowns. I retired because of that. So I also felt compelled to speak out about all of the insanity that was occurring because I didn't feel as if there was enough voices out there that were trying to express what I understood deeply at the time because of my understanding of economics and investing and interest rates and debt and, all of this stuff that I have a really good handle on. I was like, this is my moment, like I have to have a voice in this moment. And, whether or not people were going to listen, it was like a variable I couldn't have possibly known the answer to, but I was like, I'm going to try and express the danger that we're putting ourselves in under this bizarre lie of a moniker of like, if it saves one life. I was like, look, so many more people will die because of the economic consequences of what we're doing to ourselves right now. I can't even like possibly overstate how catastrophic the decisions we're making in this moment are. So if no one's going to say that, well, what the fuck choice do I have? So honestly, I just felt drawn to it. I just felt like a calling. Like I have to try to get this message out. And the fact that I titled it Liberty Lockdown obviously helped with the marketing to like let people know instantly, like, okay, this is what this guy's about.
Yeah.
And then I just got very fortunate in that, the libertarian community is relatively small. And because I had a really, passionate message that I was trying to deliver, I feel like I was just kind of embraced by all of my heroes, you know, Ron and Tom and Dave and everybody else. It was crazy.
Which one was like the craziest cosign you ever got?
Oh, Dave, for sure, dude. Like Dave, I know it's weird to say now because like he and I are actually friends, but you know, Dave was my hero. I've told the story before, but like I started listening. I've been listening to Joe Rogan since 2010. You know, like I started on like episode 50, and I think it was like 2015, 2016 that Dave was on there for the first time, and I heard him, and I was just like, Clint is on Joe Rogan right now. You know, like that's what I heard. I was like, that's my brain is on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's vibing with it, and millions of people are listening. And that was so revelatory to me. It was such a big moment that like there is a market for our message, because at the time this was after like the Ron Paul revolution had totally fizzled out. It felt as if there was really no hope. Everyone had just kind of like gone back to, you know, working or whatever, or raising their family. And then I just hear this voice in the wilderness, and I'm like, oh, there's still one of us. Like we're still alive. Like the pulse is still there. So when Dave first, I started my show, and he came on my show like a year later, and we pretty quickly became friends after that. And it's just like, it's still surreal. You know, like I pick him up at events and shit, and I like drive him around sometimes, or we speak at events together, and it never gets less strange. You know, I'm like, this is so bizarre that he's like now my friend. But yeah, he was my hero.
No, I feel you. I like, you know, Zach Amico.
Yeah.
I had a similar moment because I started out listening to his podcast, him and Lewis. I listened to their podcast for a while, and then I was just me, him, and BK Chris. We were like doing a show together, and I'm like driving them. I'm like, this is ridiculous. this is so silly.
Yeah, dude. I mean, you performed at Skankfest. How fucking dope is that?
Yeah, that was a big full circle, because that's how. So I was curious here. I'll segue into my next question with this, where I started out doing comedy because I was just like a hardcore comedy fan, really loved Skanks and all that shit. And then I heard Dave on that, and then I started listening to Part of the Problem, and it was just like a slow burn for me, where I'd be like, no, like he would say something every week, and I'd be like, and then I'd like look it up, I'd be like, I guess, and then so then that sort of like segued, and then I started to get like, and then it was like enough things were like, wait a minute, like that's not what it was the whole time, and then it got me like obsessed with that. I'm always very curious. Like, I know this is like the cliched libertarian question, but like, how did it hit for you?
Well, yeah, I'm one of the rare second gen libertarians. My dad was a libertarian who founded it in the 1970s. So I was born in the 80s. And
wait, you said he helped found it?
No, I'm sorry. He found it. He didn't found it. I mean, it was founded like a decade prior. So like he was very close to the original, you know, founding of the Libertarian Party.
Well, yeah, if it was in the 70s, he's probably one of like the first 30.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Or first couple thousand. Like honestly, he could be.
Like no bullshit. Yeah, first couple thousand without a doubt.
Yeah, it's very strange. But you know, I wasn't really raised by him. I was raised by my mom and my stepdad. But I would spend 1 week in a month with him, and I would do these car rides that were like 4.5-5 hours long to his nightclub that he was running, because he was an entrepreneur too, which is why I ended up going down an entrepreneurial path. But he would spend these 4-hour car rides each way, so like 8 hours a weekend, you know, one time a month, where he would just tell me about the founding fathers and investing and interest rates and like all this shit and I was 5, you know, I was 5 and 6 years old. It was just totally bizarre. But it stuck with me, you know, like those ideas, those principles, that passion, that love of liberty, the founding ideals of our nation, like all of those things really resonated with me, and I never lost that feeling. And then by the time I was in high school, I was like arguing for, you know, I was arguing against war, and I was arguing for drug legalization, and everyone was like, oh, you're a liberal. And then I'd be like, no, I want no taxes either. And they're like, what the fuck? You know, like people didn't understand what I was saying, because I was just very, at the time, like you can't even imagine, like this is late 90s, like no one knows what I'm talking about, you know, like this is not a thing that people talk about. I'm proud to say that all of those people that I was drunkenly telling about, you know, Austrian economics and non-intervention, almost all of them are now libertarians. So I like, you plant that seed, it just seems like it blossoms naturally. So I'm very proud of that, you know, most of my inner circle has become at least quasi libertarian, if not full blown, over the past 20 years. And Then the Ron Paul revolution starts. I knew Ron, obviously. I knew of him before that moment. That gave me a lot of hope that, maybe we could see something here because of the lies about WMDs and the terrible, illegal wars that we had implemented over the 9/11 attacks. And I was just like, okay, well, we got a real shot here. Like this is a moment. And that lit a fire in me that, basically I felt as if there was a possibility that we could actually have kind of a new enlightenment into the people valuing liberty. And then we have the fucking lockdowns, which is like the antithesis of liberty. And I'm like, oh, well, I've had all these heroes that have inspired me, Dave and Ron and everybody else. It's my time. It's my turn to contribute to this cause, as opposed to just being inspired by it and living my life and trying to benefit from the knowledge I have when it comes to investing and things like that. Like, that was all great. But there just comes a time, I think, in most people's lives where they feel like I need to do something to help with something that's really important. And I don't think that there's anything more important than arguing in favor of human liberty when the world is speeding very rapidly towards totalitarianism.
Yeah, I completely identify with what you're saying, because like that's a similar drive for me. Is I always have a thing in me where I'm like, I think about it a lot when I'm like podcasting, whenever I want to like stay focused on like what to talk about. Like when we do panties in the mouth, we're just drinking and smoking and being dumb. But when I do this shit, I'm just like, I'm focused on like, how can I help? And then also, it wasn't anything directly like my dad taught me. He didn't have that like sit me down like Boys in the Hood and was like, all right, son, this is how it is. He was like, my dad was always just like a good, solid dude. And it instilled like, just be a good person. And then that, like that Ron Paul thing. I remember it was actually at a Robbie, at a show with Robbie. Someone had a Ron Paul shirt on. It just said like, be brave. And it hit me. And I was like, yeah, like just like do the right thing. Like, don't be a pussy.
Yeah, dude. I think that's also part of why Jordan Peterson and even Andrew Tate to a certain extent have had such a ferocious explosion and following. And it's like there's a real dearth, there's a real lack of strong masculine, like but like beautiful masculine principles that are taught to the young people and like are embraced by the adults that are teaching the young. And I think libertarianism can fill that void to a large extent, because there is something really beautiful about like, I'm going to fight to be free, like I'm willing, like live free or die. Like, is there anything more fucking savage than that? And beautifully savage. Like, I just think it's such a great message, particularly for young men. It does resonate with women to some extent too, but like ultimately the men are the ones that fight the wars. That's how it's been throughout human history until relatively recently. And I think that it's a message that resonates with young men.
Yeah. What's your read on Andrew Tate? Because I was actually listening. Shout out Jose from No Way Jose, because I've been really enjoying the what's it called, the Pony Boys.
Yeah.
Because I know Reed was doing the Four Horsemen, but like he went back to work and is not doing them as much. So I'm really enjoying like the roundtable discussions you guys are having. You had to I'm in this like weird place right now with Andrew Tate, because I've just started doing like a deep dive into him. Because you'll see you'll see the shit on Instagram or TikTok where he's talking about chicks and all this other stuff, and it seems very vapid. But then, like when Balenciaga happened, I saw this video where he's like breaking down Satanism, and he's like convincing me on it. And then, dude, the video right after, so when he got arrested in Romania, they let him out. They eventually got him again. He's like in jail now. But like when he got let out, that right before they got him, there's a video of him and he's in like a bathrobe or whatever, or like a robe, and he's around all these hot chicks. And it's like him and his brother are arguing over if 0 is a real number or not. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? So, but
he's very strange.
He's very interesting. I'm not sure if I'm like convinced on him or like there's sure, I don't know. I'm like mixed on the dude right now, but I think the thing a lot of people are missing is they're like, why is he so popular? And it's a similar thing. I'm glad you said Jordan Peterson, because I relate it to like, he is kind of like Jordan Peter-esque at things. He's just not talking about Pinocchio every other minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He ain't talking about, allegories and the beauty of the Bible and stuff like that. He's more like, he's like pivoting it into, like dope cars and women and stuff like that too. Like he has a much more of an appeal to like the young guy who's single and like trying to, I don't know, like grind, like become wealthy and successful and get the women and all that. Like he's a hybrid. He's a hybrid of those two things. He's like the pickup culture as well as kind of this male masculine figure. He's a fighter. You know, he's got a lot of appealing aspects or appealing traits in that regard. You know, honestly, I think he's probably a bad guy. Like I do think he's probably a bad guy. Like that's my honest, like that's my knee jerk reaction is like I think that he's probably been, but I don't mean that in the criminal sense. Like I think like morally he sounds like a bad guy. Like his claim to fame or like his real wealth generation appears to have been pimping women. Like he created a web stream or whatever they're called for girls that just get naked on webcams.
Yeah.
And then he also brags about how he would have Johns that these girls would like basically scam out of money saying like, oh, I'll come and visit you, but I got to make sure that I get my passport right. You got to send me $5,000, da 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 da. And like, he's bragging about all this. So like, he sounds like a scumbag, you know, he sounds like he's just a dude that's like it's funny because he's waking up a lot of men and he's giving a lot of good lessons about like how to become successful and how not to trust the government and how to be an entrepreneur and all these things. Like these are all good messages, but then simultaneously he's abusing a bunch of incels by like teasing them with these women lures that he has. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's not really fucking noble, is it? You know? So yeah. I think he's a mixed bag, you know, like, but I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem with having a nuanced view on someone. Like, I think Jordan Peterson is incredible. And he also failed terribly when it came to the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates. He failed terribly.
Yeah. And then like, he gets back on Twitter, and within 5 minutes, he's talking about getting people off Twitter. But if you read his books rule, like I've read like one and a half of his books. They're great.
They're great. And they're great lessons for young men. So I like human beings are messy. I think that there's this terrible, trend right now where like you either you love them for everything that they are because they're totally perfect, or you hate them because there's one little thing about them that's fucked up. And it's like, I don't know. There's no one that's totally perfect. So I can forgive that Jordan, like he wants anonymous people to be banned from Twitter. I think that's a terrible idea. He went along. He was like, just get your jab, stop your whining. And I'm like, yeah, you're an idiot. Like, what are you doing? Yeah. But then he also defended speech rights. Like, and he's also, I mean, he's made a ton of money on it. So it's not like he's a total martyr or anything, but he's also had his life fucking totally thrown into upheaval. He gets his license threatened by Canada right now. The reason he rose to prominence is because he took a courageous stand when he didn't have to. He didn't have to do that. He could have just acquiesced and been a professor and started to use people's preferred pronouns. And he was like, no, fuck you. Like, you don't get to dictate my speech. You don't get to do that. And you'll never be able to do that. I just wish he carried that same gusto into like, you don't get to tell me that I have to put something on my body or I have to wear something on my face. Like, it's all the same principles. So he fell short, but overall I still give him a B+, so
yeah. I don't know. I always say like the big benefit of Jordan Peterson is he's like de-incelling the world, and that's a huge undertaking, and I appreciate it.
Yes, for sure. And he's reaching out to the most desperate men on earth. Like, these guys are like on the verge of suicide or homicide. Like, a lot of these guys are like in a really dark place.
Yeah.
And he's like reaching a hand out to those people and lifting tens of thousands, maybe millions of them up. That's a fucking beautiful thing. Like, and for anyone to just discount that, and many people hate him for that, which is so fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a lot of love for both those guys in their own ways, and I also have big disagreements.
Yeah, no, that a lot of people miss that when they're like, this shit is obvious. Like, I remember I was watching that. I was watching that Hassan dude, because this is why I'm a big proponent of like, also watch the people you don't like, because I remember watching this clip and he was talking about Jordan Peterson. He's just like, this is obvious shit. And then it clicked in me. I was like, yeah, for you. But like the guy who doesn't know this needs Jordan Peterson desperately.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's good that he's doing this shit. Because, dude, I swear to God, that was like, because my parents aren't like libertarians or anything. They were always like, middle of the road Republicans. And then when Trump came around, they're basically that, but vote Democrat. Like, they were never, but I remember my dad always like if like say they were at a comedy show or some performance that they didn't like, my dad was always like, yeah, I'm not gonna like make a thing of it. If I don't like it, I'm just gonna leave. And that was always like a thing for me where it's just like, okay, Jordan Peterson's not for you, but like, why can't anyone else have him?
Exactly, dude.
It's such a weird response to him.
Yeah, it's like The View is so vapid and insane. You know, like I'll never watch it unless I'm just doing it for like a clip for my show. But like, I don't want them to be banned and deplatformed. And I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to like chastise every single human being that finds it enjoyable, even though I think it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So like, just carry that same principle, but when it goes to the other side of the fence, and people just can't do it. It's crazy, man.
Yeah. So I wanted to, this is actually a decent segue into another question I had, because you're talking about messy people. And once again, listening to Pony Boys, shout out Jose. I didn't realize you were such like a big Kanye dude. And you said something really interesting that I want you to break down on here. You said right now, you said Kanye is a really good litmus test. What does that mean?
Well, a litmus test is usually used in political lingo. Just for your audience, I'm sure you know what it means, but basically it's like this bar that must be met, and then you can like, once you meet that, you go like, okay, you're an okay person, like you're acceptable to me. That's how, you know, a lot of people view politicians. Like for a libertarian, it's like, all right, do you want to shrink the size of the government? Like that's a litmus test. Like if you say yes, then I don't hate you, essentially. So I feel like Kanye, like a lot of people, their judgment of his quote unquote bizarre behavior over the past couple months, like that's a litmus test for me as to like whether or not you're a critical thinker. Like if you're able to actually analyze what he's saying, how he's saying it, why he's saying it, the path that he's on, like are you able to actually really analyze this, or are you just seeing, you know, him say I love Hitler and then you're just like, this dude's a Nazi? You know, like,
yeah,
because if you jump to that conclusion, like I don't think you're really a thinking person, honestly.
Well, that was like, that part was like so obvious to me where like no, he's definitely got some beef with some Jews. That's yes, obvious.
He does. Yeah.
But I remember like I think I tweeted it where I was like, I don't think Kanye is a card-carrying member of the Nazi party. Like he's clearly, now I don't know if I figured it out, but he's like clearly doing something else.
Yes. Yeah, he is. He's troll. I mean, it's trolling paired with like a defense of free speech, with a war against cancel culture, with a war against some of the Jewish people that have wronged him in the business world and the record world in particular, but also in the fashion world, apparently. You know, it's very multifaceted, but I think that's why it's a litmus test to me. Is like, are you able to process all of this that's going on, or are you just like, everyone hates him now, I hate him too? You know, like, all right. I mean, if you're that type of person, like, I don't know. I just don't vibe with people like that.
I feel that.
And for the record, like, you can listen to everything he says and go like, I still don't like it. You know, like, I don't like what he's doing. Like, okay, that's fine. But like, I just want to make sure that you're like able to understand that there's layers to what he's doing right now. And there's also an Andy Kaufman-esque aspect to it, where he's like, he is putting on a act. Like, this is a character that he's playing, and he's you know, what's the term? You know, basically he's hinted at it over the past couple of years. Like, this is something that he was going to do. He's been thinking about it for a long time. He said, I out Alex Jones, and I put Andy Kaufman in the old folks home. That's the quote that he used. And it's like, the fact that he referenced Andy Kaufman tells you a lot. Like, if you know anything about Andy Kaufman, he was this comedian that became this like fucking wrestler, and he was doing all this crazy performance art where he was a heel, where he was beating up women and trying to get the crowd to fucking despise him, and some of them even attacked him. Like, this was a big thing in the 80s or something like that. And but he was doing it all like it was an art form to him, and some people got it and other people didn't. And I feel like that's what Kanye is right now. He is on an Andy Kaufman path.
Yeah, the one thing that's tripping me up about Kanye though, and I heard you talking to what was his name, Shane Cashman. He's got a really you guys were talking about that article. I had the name of it up. It seems really interesting because he got to like spend a whole day with Kanye, like 2 whole days with Kanye, and talk about all this shit. And but I was the Case for President Ye Part 1. It's on timcast.com. But I guess my whole thing with it's like, I don't like this. This to me looks like a setup. I don't see the dismount.
Right.
I don't see what the dismount is.
Well, for Kaufman, there wasn't one. Like he never like came out and said like this has all been an act. You know, he just fucking I think that there's something about performer like real artists where, you know, like they're not going to tell you what the art is supposed to inform you. You know, like many artists will take that with their paintings, even like they'll show it to someone and someone will be like, what were you going for here? And they'll just be like, that's up to you. I think that's what this is. I think like they want the observer to decide what this is. And, you know, I'm not saying that you have to go like, I like this art. You can hate the art still. Like, that's fine. But just understand that it's art. Like, that's what he's trying to do. And I know it's very like high level because you're like, wait, his entire life is dedicated to some sort of art form. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, he is. Like, that's how fucking weird this guy is. And that's why he's so, to someone like me, that's why he's so special, because his entire life has been this way. You know, 25 years he's been in the public eye, just constantly remaking himself and doing all sorts of, you know, bizarre creative shit. He's a music producer who can't get on as a rapper, even though he's got bars. Everyone's like, fuck you. You're a producer. You make great beats. Stick with that. He's like, no, he breaks through, becomes, you know, maybe the biggest rapper in history or very, very close. And then he's like, I'm going to become the biggest designer in America. You know? And everyone's like, oh, you're out of your fucking mind. And then he's like, now I'm going to become president of the United States. Like, this dude is wild. So, you know, I just don't think it's like any more wild for him to go on Alex Jones and start talking about how he loves the Nazis.
Well, and also it is like, I think I said this in the one tweet and also when I was talking about it on the podcast, but you see his like track record is he has this track record of being like, how far can I push it and still be good? Now, you know, there's a good chance he's not ever going to be allowed on mainstream shit, but we were talking about it earlier. Mainstream shit kind of sucks for the most part.
Yeah, it's all dying anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, there is this thing of like, why would you even want to go there? And people were like, oh, he lost $500,000. It's like, yeah, dude, I'm sorry, $500,000. Jesus Christ, $500 million.
No,
and
he
it's like
lost $2 billion. He lost $500 million per year for the next 4 years, just from the Adidas contract alone. $2 billion.
Oh yeah, he lost a potential $2 billion. But then it's like, all this shit happens. He became the most hated dude to, like, you know, common American person, to common person probably in the world, because you know it's not just America paying attention to this.
Sure.
And he still has like $400 million. So it's like, it may not be the average person's view of good, but like, he's still good.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's going to be okay financially if for no other reason other than he's just eternally creative and he's going to find ways to innovate and create products. And so, yeah, I think he'll be okay. But like, still, you know, the vast majority of people that get to that level of wealth, they don't want to risk that. They don't want to jeopardize that. So like, I'm of the opinion that anytime I see something like even Elon Musk, even though many libertarians don't trust him, you know, the fact that he threw his hat in the ring, you know, a lot of people are going to think that I'm going to be talking about his acquisition of Twitter. No, what told me that he was something special is when he said ESG is evil. He just tweeted that out a year ago. And like, that's a big deal, you know, for that. The richest man on earth at the time to say that was fucking awesome and courageous. And like a lot of people think that his acquisition of Twitter is why he's now reviled. I think it has as much to do with his highlighting of ESG. Like that's the whole game, you know, and he just put it on display like this shit's evil. So like there's very rare people that get to the highest levels of power and wealth and just decide to like say something that is not to their best interest. And I think that takes courage, and I'm going to appreciate it. And I think that like we ought to do that as the quote unquote common people. Like our oligarchs are actually, you know, telling a little bit of the truth, and people are like, "Fuck you." I'm like, no, like clap when they do something good. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, Elon Musk seems like he's doing like the billionaire version of. Like I was talking to my friends. I was like, yo, it'd be cool to start like a food truck. And I looked up how to start a food truck, and you got to get like 2 different health certifications. You got to pay like 4 different taxes. And I'm just looking at that like, the fuck I got to do that for? And Elon Musk, I think, is doing the billionaire version of that. Like, the fuck I got to worry about these assholes and shit. What's your,
That's what it is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
What's your read on actually twofold question, because one, a lot of like I see a lot of libertarians online, and they get kind of like they get lost in the sauce of like like I think because they're so used to being like let down intellectually, or just used to something not going the way they would prefer it, is they hyper focus on what's wrong. And I notice a lot of people hyper focusing on Elon Musk and like the things he's doing wrong. And it's like, I think a lot of people are missing the bigger picture of, bro, like you said, just him tweeting out like ESG is bad, him, you know, taking Twitter and making it substantially less lame and stuff like that. Like,
Right.
and then on top of that, like he's a special case because he's like the richest guy in the world, or one of them, or the richest guy legally in the world. And he's like, he's doing all this shit to kind of like push the world in a less totalitarian way, in a better way and stuff like that. Like, so I guess the second part of the question is like what is it that, why aren't there more? I don't know. It reminds me of this like Killer Mike lyric I heard where he's talking about Don Sterling, doing his whole thing where he like bitched up when everyone was coming at him. And Killer Mike's just like, who gonna fuck with me if I like, he's basically saying like, no one's gonna tell me what to do if I have $1 billion. But you see these people with so much money, but they're still being like, bro, if I had like $50 million, I'd do whatever the fuck I wanted. Fuck like
Exactly,
these people
dude.
with hundreds of $1 millions who are like bitched up. I don't know. That's a lot. So
That's how I feel too, dude. I only got a couple $1 million, and I was like, peace, I'm out. I'm gonna go tell the truth. You know, so like,
yo, for real.
If I had 50 million, like I would be an animal. You know, like,
Yeah, right. Even when I said 50, I'd be like, yo, give me one.
exactly, dude. So like, I think that's, you know, but that just goes to show like character and like how you're built and like what you're passionate about, what you're really about. Like I think most people, they just want to be safe and secure, and you know, like that's, libertarians aren't that way. I mean, the real ones, like they're not that way. Like I want to be fucking free, man. You know, like so that to me is, it's worth all of the risk. It's worth the undoubted watch list that I've been put on and shit like that, because like I don't give a fuck, you know, like the world is heading in a dictatorship, totalitarian type of, you know, framing. So am I going to wait until it gets to that point and then try and speak out? Like, no, fuck no, dude. Like I'm going to talk now. And then if it gets so crazy, maybe I'll cut out, you know, like maybe I'll have to.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try while I can. So anytime I see any of these guys that are super wealthy, that are doing anything positive for the world, and I'll grant the libertarians that are skeptical of Elon, yes, he wants to put chips in our brains, and yes, he probably just bought Twitter primarily because he wants the data so he can help with his AI technology. Yeah, I get all that. I understand all that. Of course, he has ulterior motives, but is it better? Is it better than when it was owned by these fucking tyrants that were, you know, taking direct orders from the FBI as to who and what to ban? And the CDC, it's like, it's fucking clearly better. So I don't know, chill the fuck out.
Well, it's like, I look at it this way. I'm like, okay, would you rather every billionaire be like Elon, or every billionaire be like Mark Zuckerberg? And you go, oh yeah, Elon. So it's like just realize the bigger picture on that shit.
I agree.
Yeah, man, this has been a great conversation. Let's wrap it up in a second, but oh yeah, another thing you guys were talking about is like so I see a lot. I was hearing you guys talk about it on an earlier episode, like the last. Oh, you posted it on your feed when you guys did Tower Gang. Actually, shout out Tower Gang. And you guys were talking about like what the LP should do. And I think it's kind of funny, like libertarians, they know all about like free markets and all this other stuff. But then when it comes to like, what should we do in the realm of politics? Like everyone starts to become central planners.
Yeah, right.
It's very, and I'm like, cause I was always looking, cause it's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, because I was just about to hit one. Well, like, okay, so perfect example is, like, what the fuck am I trying? Because I was gonna compare it to the old LP Twitter account. The old LP Twitter account stunk, but also too, like,
yeah, it was
like
so bad.
I don't want it to just be like the LP New Hampshire account all the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like that's still needed. it can't be that all the time. But like when they posted that Meghan McCain tweet and it made people like really talk about, it's like, okay, please tell me why this tweet is fucked up. Right. Please tell me why this tweet, it made people kind of go like, all right, but like, it can't be that all the time. You know what I mean? Yes. So it's like, I think for me personally, I think the road forward is just like, figure out what you're good at and do the shit out of it.
Yes. Hey, preach. I mean, that has been my message for years, is like, I reach people that are more angry because I'm more angry.
Yeah.
There's people that are less angry, and like Tom Woods, I think, is a better outlet for that because he doesn't approach it with such fury like I do.
Yeah.
And then some people want more humor thrown in. I think Dave's better at that, or Robbie. You know, there's different lanes, and I just don't think that there is a one size fits all model that's going to appeal to everybody, because there fucking isn't. Yeah. You know, that's just obviously true. So I hate it when they want to have monolithic messaging. Like, it's just not reality, and it's also not who we are. We're a very diverse group of people that have different frameworks and different solutions. I mean, our solutions are largely the same, but the pathway to get there is different for many of us. And I think that like we have all failed to reclaim liberty over our lifetimes. So have some humility and say, perhaps I'm not right. Yeah. Perhaps my belief that, you know, LPNH is going to ruin the Libertarian Party isn't correct. You know, maybe it's not correct. Just consider that for a second.
Yeah, just consider you don't know everything for once.
Yeah, because we haven't fucking made any progress practically in 40 years. I mean, yeah, we got like some drug decriminalization and shit like that, but like that's it. like the taxes are up, war's up, you know, everything else is crazy. So like, I don't know. I just think it's like it's all hands on deck. Everybody do what they're best at, grow as much as possible, reach as many people as possible. That's it. Just do that, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Let's go. That's some positivity to end the episode on. Clint, where can the people check you out?
Well, you can check me out on January 17th on Timcast IRL. Myself and Top Lobster, 2 members of Tower Gang, will be on there. And if you want to see my solo show, which is more of the fury and the seriousness of the libertarian movement, it is Liberty Lockdown. It's on YouTube. However, I got suspended for a week for my episode with James Lindsay. So I will be back on there in a couple days. But in the meantime, I'm putting the full episodes up on Rumble. So make sure you go subscribe on Rumble and YouTube, Liberty Lockdown. It's also any podcatcher too. Thanks for having me, man. It's fun.
Hey, man, thanks for coming. And you guys better go check Clint out. His shit rules. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good one. Be about it. Peace. Recording. I'll edit this out.